pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We would like to introduce some officials who are not on stage right now. And audience, please hold your applause until the very end. To begin with, candidate Ian Schlachman's running mate, Reverend, and please stand, Reverend Annie Chambers. Candidate James Jones, running mate, Charles Waters. American Association of University Women co-president for Maryland, Kate Campbell Stevenson, and Erin Prangley, vice president for public policy. And also the co-sponsors are Maryland Legislative Agenda for Women, Karen Williams, representative, and Business and Professional Women's Foundation of Maryland. You can now applaud. We would also like to acknowledge all the dignitaries here today. Could you please stand if you're an elected official and I have not named you yet, and give us your name and title. Is there anyone in the audience who I have not named? Yes.
Hi, I'm Linda Mahoney. I'm on the Democratic Central Committee in Montgomery County.
Thank you, Ms. Mahoney. Anyone else in the audience? All right. At this time, I would like to ask the president of the Business and Professional Women's, Ms. Teresa Foster, and the president of the Maryland State National Active and Retired Federal Employees, Dr. Gary Roundtree Sr., to come and welcome you.
Thank you, Suda. Welcome, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the forum this evening. I'm looking forward to hearing from the candidates, especially their answers to all our questions. And I won't stay long, but I do want to say, please remember to vote June 26, 2018. Thank you. Dr. Deary.
Good evening, everyone. We here at the Maryland Federation are so delighted to have you here and to participate and share in this Maryland Gubernatorial Candidates Forum. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. And that many of you have traveled long distances serves to remind all of us how important our work is not done yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Foster and Dr. Roundtree. At this time, would the past president of the state for NARFE, Ted Jensen, please introduce our moderators, of course, because you will not see their faces for the entire time. Yes.
Good evening, and again, thanks for coming. It's my pleasure tonight to introduce our moderators, Ms. Diane Polangan, who is also a past president, except a much bigger deal than me. She was the past national president of the Business and Professional Women's Association, as well as the state president, and a former councilwoman from the city of Bowie. So she's, I'm sure, well suited to her task tonight, and keep this rowdy bunch in control. So. And the other moderator is Mr. Paul Schwartz. He's one of our folks at NARFE. He's very active with our state legislative activities. He just practically lives in Annapolis, and he also writes a column for the Montgomery County Sentinel. So I know he's ready to go tonight. So thank you very much.
We will now begin it, but I want to get you some ground rules for the audience. Candidates are seated according to the number that they drew from a hat, and the moderators will follow the sequence of questions accordingly. Example, candidate number 1, we now have Mr. Sean Quinn there also, will be asked and respond to the first question and so on. Each candidate will have 3 minutes for the opening statement, which will include the single most significant difference among them and between them and Governor Hogan. Candidates will have 2 minutes to answer each question by the moderator. And the candidates will also have 2 minutes for the closing statements. Most important, audience, please refrain from clapping and visibly or audibly openly expressing your personal agreement or disagreement with any candidate's comments during the forum. The forum is being videotaped and live streamed by NARFE's Ted Page and Pat Dempsey, and it will be posted on the BPW and NARFE's websites for future viewing. Thank you very much. We may now begin.
The opening statements are first, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
So that would be me.
I'm going to assume this long. Okay, this long. First off, I apologize for running late. There's like no easy way to get here from Southern Maryland. It was like the Beltway or 97, bumper to bumper traffic. And I tried to make a phone call, but nobody seemed to know where this hotel was on information. But I got here, so thank you for inviting me. I'm actually the Libertarian candidate, and this is my second run for governor, and I'm probably the only one running for governor that actually is a working person in the working poor that gets taxed like crazy. Every time you take a step forward, they take 5 steps back. I'm also the only candidate that puts people first. I don't have any money. I don't ask people for money. I drive around the state and I shake hands. I tell people what I can do for them. I've already, me and my running mate, Christina Smith, who unfortunately her car overheated, so she won't be here tonight. So she lives in Hagerstown, so both of us would have to drive a long day to get here. But we actually go to the communities, we go to any event in the community, and we don't just show up, we bring our money and put it into the community. Some of these candidates this year will spend $5 million when we get to the general election. I will never spend $5 million on an election. I'll feed the homeless, I'll put people in homes. That's what $5 million should be doing, not buying an office to sit up in Annapolis and do nothing for the people. So this is going to be my second run, and it's kind of nice. I'm getting to see different candidates. There's 10 Democratic candidates, and I never see all 10 of them when I go someplace. And they've seen me many, many times. So with that, I'll stop. Oh, what's different between me and Hogan? Me and Hogan have no love lost between us. He's kind of a shyster. He tells people he's doing one thing, and he does another thing. The first thing that really pissed me off about Hogan was when he took Change Maryland's money and he put it into his campaign, where it wasn't followed the campaign rules of $6,000 per person. There was no way to know where his money came from, and he just took the money. And I have a hard time with that. It's great to get money, but you should follow the rules. They're set there for a reason, and just because you're a Republican or Democrat, you shouldn't be able to go to your judge and say, hey, let this go through so I can have the money. So that was the first thing that got me turned off of Hogan, and then he used his cancer to try to get everybody to feel sorry for him. And then when 1 million Democrats didn't vote in 2014, he tried to say the Democrats were on his side. So it's a lot of shady stuff that Hogan does, and people don't want to hear. Right now he's directing money to highway programs where his properties are at, another shady deal. And I don't do things like that. If you look into my past, you will not find a single criminal activity. There won't be any accusations that I may or may not have done anything. As far back as you can look, you're going to see that I'm a straight shooter. I tell you how it is, and I don't lie to anybody. Thank you.
Good evening. Hello. My name is Krish Vignaraja, and I am running for governor. I was 9 months old when my parents fled a civil war in Sri Lanka and came to America and Maryland. They had no jobs, just $200 in their pockets, and 2 very young kids in their arms. They both became Baltimore City public school teachers and built a life here in Maryland that made my life, going from Woodlawn High to the White House, possible. I had the honor of a lifetime to serve as Michelle Obama's policy director at the White House, and before that as senior advisor to Hillary Clinton and John Kerry at the State Department. It was during that time that I had the honor of leading initiatives like Let Girls Learn. I managed a $51.6 billion budget at the State Department. I worked through the Council on Women and Girls on issues like the implementation of the Lilly Ledbetter Act. I also worked through the Council on Women and Girls on women's entrepreneurship, supporting small and women-owned businesses. These were the issues that I care about and I have committed my life to because they are the issues of my life story. But I also had the honor before I joined the Obama administration, where I in fact was a federal employee, of being a lawyer as well as in business. And so in terms of what distinguishes me and the rest of the field and what distinguishes me and Governor Hogan, there are a range of ways to look at it. First, I am the only candidate who was both a federal employee and also a working woman. I am also the only candidate in the field who has worked at the highest levels of the federal government, at the highest levels of law, as well as business. And I am the only candidate who has been called Donald Trump's worst nightmare in article after article. And while I realize that that is and should be a badge of honor, in terms of what I'm running on, I realize that we cannot just be anti-Trump or anti-Hogan. We've got to give people a reason to show up and vote. And for me, that has been a positive, affirmative agenda focused on 4 areas: education, revitalizing our economy, protecting our environment, and supporting working families. I'm incredibly excited to attend this forum because I do think that we're going to cover a range of important issues. But at the root of why I decided to run and why I kicked off my campaign outside of the basement apartment that I grew up in is because I know what the struggles of working families are. I know what the struggles of public employees are because I was one of those people. Both of my parents were lifelong teachers. And I know that oftentimes federal and state employees are trampled on when they should be embraced and empowered. And so I'm excited to have this conversation because whether we're talking about working women or federal employees, what you do is God's work, and I hope to be able to support you all. Thank you for having me.
Good evening. I'm Jim Shea, and I'm running for governor. Let me go right to answer the questions right away. I'm different from Larry Hogan because I'm a progressive Democrat. I hold dear all the things that we think are important: a strong public education system, a good mass transit system that moves us around and protects the environment. I'm in favor of and will work hard to create an expansive and inclusive economy. We need safe neighborhoods, we need healthy neighborhoods, and we need to protect the environment. Those are the cluster of values that we all care about, and I have to tell you, Larry Hogan rates them at a much lower level. I'm different from the other candidates on the Democratic ticket because I have a deep tie to the business community. I'm not afraid to say it. I've led large organizations, both public and private, and I'm prepared to use those executive skills as governor should you all decide to elect me. I'm not a career politician, but as I say, I have led organizations, both public and private, throughout the state. One of those was the University System of Maryland, the 12 public colleges in the state of Maryland. I was chair. I was responsible for delivering the educational system all across the state to our students of higher education. We had the largest budget in the state, as the largest public agency. We were responsible, for example, for appointing all of the presidents of each of the colleges. While I was on a board, we appointed 10 different presidents, and all of them served with integrity and distinction. While I was on the board, we cut costs, hundreds of millions of dollars of cost. We froze tuition, making college more affordable in Maryland, and we enhanced the quality of higher education in Maryland. I'm deeply embedded in the educational community of Maryland. I chaired the Central Maryland Transportation Alliance, a coalition for mass transit for 10 years. I chaired the empowerment zones in Baltimore, an economic development program for the most stressed areas of East Baltimore and West Baltimore. We provided access to capital and job training in programs that still exist today. I was chair of the Downtown Partnership and a number of other organizations. And I had a day job. I was chair of the law firm Venable, and during my 22 years of leadership, it grew to over 700 lawyers and nearly 1,500 employees, the largest in the state of Maryland and one of the largest in the world. I'm joined on my ticket by Brandon Scott, a terrific young leader of today and tomorrow's generation. He's twice elected to the Baltimore City Council, and for the last year has had the extraordinarily important position of chair of the Public Safety Committee. Together, Brandon and I have deep and varied experience on the issues that matter, but we also have a fresh perspective. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Susan Turnbull, and I'm running with Ben Jealous. And for the last 20 years, I have led women's organizations of various types. In 1997, I was elected chair of the Women's Caucus of the Democratic National Committee, which is where I met BPW the first time. I spoke at BPW events, and I actually had a niece who worked at BPW near DuPont Circle. I also chaired another organization, Jewish Women International, which again partnered with BPW. JWI has had as its mission a program to make women strong, safe, and healthy. A lot of the same things that BPW has done, which is why we worked with BPW on the Lilly Ledbetter Act, on getting the Violence Against Women Act reauthorized, and are working right now getting it reauthorized once again. We work to fight guns in our state and in our country. We work to make sure that people understood that the intersection between guns and domestic violence was a big issue. I also was the senior advisor, Democratic advisor, to an organization called WIP, Women Impacting Public Policy, a very large organization across this country that has under its umbrella BPW and a lot of the other business women's organizations. So your issues aren't not new to me, because it's something I've been advocating for my entire life, at least my entire adult life. I too grew up as the child of an immigrant. My father came and was a taxi driver when I was a child. And it conflicts in some respects with what you see today. Because my opportunities existed, and because I did get to go to college, putting together tips and financial aid and a few grants and loans and put it all together, but I didn't graduate with a whole bunch of debt, because my dad had tips. But my graduation and my education afforded me an opportunity to do things that I'm worried about that my kids aren't going to have, or my grandchildren. I'm running with Ben Jealous because he's the person who I know as a former civil rights leader who was named Marylander of the Year in 2013 for his work on saving marriage equality, repealing the death penalty, and co-chairing the DREAM Act. That together we're going to build those coalitions that I've worked on for the last 20 years. I've worked on them for women, for children, for families, and that's exactly what Ben does well. Thank you.
Good evening. Oh, that's loud, right? I'm James Jones, and I am also a candidate running for governor. I'm running for governor because I think Maryland needs stronger leadership. We need a little more innovative ideas, because right now, all of the things that our present governor has put in place, those ideas are old and they're not working. I'm here because crime throughout the state of Maryland is high, and contrary to what the other candidates are saying, for me, I want to really put crime at a place where it's lower. There used to be a time when you could walk the street at night. There used to be a time when you could go out and not worry about anything happening. But right now, murder is the thing that we see on television every day. And the reason for that, and everybody's somewhere else, everybody want to put people in jail, longer sentences, but nothing is going to change until we get these felons off of the street And my whole thing, I want to get them off the street and into job training programs. Because what happens is, as long as they're on the street, we're going to have crime. And it's going to go on and on. The other piece is, I'm an advocate for seniors. I believe that seniors should have free health care. I really believe that. My mom passed away last year, and of course the health care thing really just took me for a loop. So I'm really here to be a servant to you. I'm not a politician. I've not handled millions of dollars, but I have a heart. I have a heart for the people of this state, and I want to work for you. I want to work hard for you. No, I don't know everything, and with you, I want to partner with you, and there's a lot of things that I'm going to learn, that I want to learn, you know, because I believe that Maryland we can move forward with Maryland. My running mate, Mr. Charles Waters, we've been working on getting companies to come here because we've lost a lot of companies and industry, and so that's what we need to make Maryland great again. But before we do that, we have to make it safe again. So that's what I want to do. I want to make Maryland safe again. And in the 10 seconds that I have, you know, I just want you to know that I want to be a strong governor for you. I want to be visible. I don't want to sit behind a desk and not do anything. Because in order to know what's wrong, you have to be out there. You really have to be out there. So thank you for inviting me. I'm truly honored. And this is an honor for me anyway, to be here, to really be here at this level. And okay, that's it.
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Embry, and I'm the running mate of Rashern Baker. I want to first thank BPW and NARFE for hosting this great event. So I am a lifelong government employee, but not federal, state and local. And I have grown up and lived my entire life in Maryland, specifically in Baltimore City. And I've spent my career in public service as a prosecutor, as a deputy state's attorney in Baltimore City, overseeing the most significant reduction in violence in Baltimore in almost 40 years. At the same time that we cut arrests in half, primarily arrests for misdemeanors and crimes of addiction and poverty. I most recently had to leave a job that I loved, running the criminal division for Brian Frosh. And in that role, we did some pretty exciting things. Our Medicaid fraud unit, we were going after, in addition to traditional fraud, pill mills, and looking at how we could, through our Medicaid fraud and insurance fraud units, really attack the opiate epidemic from the prescription abuse side. We created an organized crime unit so we could partner with federal law enforcement and go after prison corruption, go after human trafficking, and go after the kinds of crimes that don't respect borders across the state and across states in the region. And I love that job, but I left it with great enthusiasm because I got to know Rashern Baker. And once I got to know him, I'd been following him for many years because the work that he'd done in Prince George's County was so directly relevant to Baltimore City, which is where I live, but also to so many communities across the state. And I wanted to try to do a really truncated description of what he faced when he came into office in Prince George's County and what he's leaving 8 years later, and why it's the kind of transformational leadership and the ability to make really tough decisions with limited resources and a tough political climate that is the kind of leadership we need for the state of Maryland. So, and he, just briefly, his history is that he grew up an Army child, a child of the Army. His father was in the Green Berets. They traveled all around. But because he went to Howard undergrad and law school, he ended up in Cheverly in Prince George's County. And he devoted himself to community development work, to working in the General Assembly as on the Appropriations Committee. And then he ran for county executive in Prince George's County. And when he took office, as you may recall, it was right after Jack Johnson, the former county executive, had been federally indicted, as had his wife. And that's another story, but the FBI was looking at investigating actively the administration when he took over. Foreclosure crisis has hit the county just about as hard as anywhere else in the country. Crime was up, partly because DC was doing so well. I will summarize and say that everything that was bad was getting worse. And 8 years later, thanks to his leadership, things are dramatically better. Prince George's County has led the state in job growth for the last 5 quarters. The foreclosure crisis is a thing of the past, and in fact, median home prices and median income have consistently risen. And the real magic of it is that the rise in wealth and the rise in job growth and educational attainments was not only in the areas that were thriving, it was in the areas that were doing the worst. So I look forward to talking more about his leadership. Thank you.
Okay, the first question deals with the topic that impacts just about every Marylander, taxes. And it's going to, I think there's only 6, it's going to be for everyone. We'll start with Ms. Vina Raja.
You call me Krish.
Thank you. Bless you. The recently enacted federal tax bill resulted in Maryland taxpayers being hit with an additional $500 million tax bill at the state level, and that's per the Comptroller's Office, Peter Franchot. Governor Hogan, your potential opponent in November, attempted to minimize the impact on those who ordinarily itemize by submitting bills that would have allowed itemizing at the state level, even if taking the newly raised standard deduction at the federal level. And more importantly, they added back many of the deductions that had been eliminated at the federal level, such as real estate taxes and mortgage interest. Neither bill made it out of committee. Since the simple tax math is the less you deduct, the more you pay, it is in effect a tax hike for those who ordinarily itemize. My question is, where do you stand on this specific tax issue? And if you become governor, what will you do to address this increased tax burden on Maryland taxpayers in future tax years? Because it doesn't end with just one tax year. If it's not fixed, it goes on for future tax years.
It's a great question, because I do think part of why it is so important who gets elected the next governor is because we are going to continue to see insanity at the national level. I mean, let's be honest about it. We know that we have a president who honestly does not, I would call him a reverse Robin Hood. He steals from the poor and gives to the rich. And the tax bill is a perfect example of this. And this is where state leadership matters, because state leadership is going to be the front line on this issue. And so for me, I feel very strongly that we should make sure that there is no harm in terms of Marylanders' tax bills increasing, because we realize that we have high taxes in Maryland. And it is what I think results in a competitive disadvantage that has now been accelerated by what the president has done. So as governor, I absolutely would resurrect those bills, because I do think it's going to be incredibly important that we are reactive in this respect. But I also think that true leadership by the governor is going to be making sure that if there are ways in which we could offset these harms. Because I know right now the politicians are talking about, well, you know, how do we address these quote-unquote losses of revenues? Those were losses only because of what the federal government did. It's not as though it's actually lost revenue by the governor. And so for me, what I want to look into is how can we be creative to make sure that we mitigate the effect to Marylanders. So a good example of that would be looking at retirement benefits that typically would be taxed at the state level to see if we could reduce that taxation so that we can mitigate the harm. Because this is where you realize that families in our state are hurting. And we are losing people and businesses to Virginia and Delaware because our tax structures are not as helpful. And that's where I realize that we have to be proactive, because if we don't, our state is going to be in decline.
I to remind everybody, I'm Jim Shea, and let me address the specific question about the bills that were submitted by these fine organizations, your organization, which I completely agree with. You should be allowed to itemize your deductions on your state return. That is the fair way to do it, and indeed that's the way it was before the tax, in effect, before the tax bill was passed. It also is important because your provision that you're recommending or proposing really helps the middle class. They're the ones who are getting nailed by this inability to itemize deductions and having the standard deduction be the only way to do it. So all on board on that. Let me talk a little more generally about tax policy. I get asked the question all the time. People I know in the business community say, when are you going to cut taxes? And I say to them, my ultimate goal is to reduce taxes. But if your first reaction is to cut taxes, cut government, soon, very soon, you're cutting into muscle, you're cutting into bone. Education's a perfect example. We need to invest in education. We need to have the best public education system in the United States, and we need to compete on a worldwide basis. We need a good transportation system to move people to their jobs and to move commerce through the state. We need infrastructure in order to propel our economy forward. We have to do those things first. If we do those things wisely, if we invest wisely in these extraordinarily important things, then we'll have a robust economy. Then we'll be able to look at reducing taxes. But if you start off right now reducing taxes when we already have a weak education system and an incoherent transportation system, we'll go down lower and lower and lower. And finally, we won't have any services at all. So the way to do it is to build with what we got that's good. Education returns an unbelievable return on the investment. You reduce expenses at the same time you raise revenues. So wise investments, and then down the road, we'll see.
Hi. Ben and I this week actually sent out an email to our supporters and talking about how the tax bill, this week is Small Business Week, and how the tax bill actually hurt small businesses because it did nothing for them. It masqueraded as a tax bill when it was a tax scam. And one of the things that we looked at in talking about this is the people who benefited from this were primarily real estate developers and people in land sales. Well, guess what our governor does? He was a real estate developer who specialized in land sales. And so while he is saying he wants to work on this to help small business, what he is doing is nothing. And that's where we are now. Ben and I looked at this and also recognized that right now we're in a state that's probably one of the wealthiest states and the wealthiest country in the world. And it's not really a resources problem. What we have is a priorities problem, which is why we're making education our #1 priority and making health care and ending mass incarceration part of that as well. We support what NARFE put forward as for amendments to accommodate what had happened in Washington. But what we want to do in every level is to make sure that regardless of what happens in Washington, we in Maryland succeed. By ending mass incarceration, we would have dollars available for other things, like higher education. And next Monday, we're having a rally, actually, with Bernie Sanders in Prince George's County to talk about just that, to talk about making college more affordable. There are things that we can do. What the president has done, what is out there is wrong, and Maryland needs to fix it.
Obviously, I feel that I hear a lot of people talk about lowering taxes and doing different things. I do think that taxes are high for everybody, you know. But because I really wouldn't want to say that I would lower taxes or whatever. I think that you would have to at least be in the position to see exactly what it is, and then you would probably have to take time to sit down, because obviously it's not easy, not even for the governor, to lower taxes. I believe it's a process. So I'm not going to say, you know, I'm going to do this and do that. If I'm elected governor, then I think I would want to sit down and see what could be done, what can be done. And I think at that point, you know, it would be beneficial to the people. I'm not going to talk about schools and adding any more expenditures. I think we spend too much money as it is, unnecessarily. But as far as the taxes are concerned, it's something that should be looked at for the person who's elected governor. That's what I think.
It's often said that a budget is a moral document. Less often is it said that a tax code is a moral document as well, but I would argue that it's never been more true than what we're seeing coming down from the federal government. I was disappointed that Maryland did not act to protect especially middle-class taxpayers and allow them to itemize. I think that was a shame, and I thought that was smart, good legislation. But I do want to echo one of the themes that has come through, is that because of what is happening at the federal government and the clear desire to undermine efforts that we care about in Maryland, and also to underfund states like Maryland that did not vote for our current president, we do have to be cognizant that we will in Maryland have to make up the difference, whether it's in education, whether it's in environmental protections, whether it's in protecting federal workers. I mean, we have to be able to be flexible and spend money to take the necessary protections against what the federal government is doing. So I think, as I said at the beginning, a tax code is a moral document, and we need to be looking at it that way and looking at how do we incentivize and protect Marylanders in this time when we are so clearly under attack by the federal government. Thank you for the question.
I think a big problem is people don't understand how the tax code worked before. The only thing Donald Trump did by raising the minimum, or the standard deduction, was that he caused people that were doing deductions federally not to have to. But the way the tax code's set up, if you do the short form federally, you have to do the short form state. That's why this bill was put in. And it addressed the next problem we have in Maryland. Our legislators sliding bills into their desk drawer because they can't make anything off the bill at this time. Hogan's been doing it this whole year. You notice he's spending like crazy. Couldn't get school money out of him for the last 3 years, but all of a sudden he has $3 million for schools. Where'd the money come from? We're constantly having these legislators tell us what we should have instead of us telling them what they should have. We recently had a bill go through that they were supposed to vote on to give the people in the state the right to vote on marijuana. They literally said, I went and talked to these legislators, they told me that people aren't smart enough to vote on marijuana. That is their attitude, and that is why bills don't get passed. If they're not gonna make a profit on the bill, it's not gonna hit the floor, because they're not gonna take a chance that it might slide through and they don't get anything out of it. The next problem we have is our general fund. We should not be taking money in for all these different projects and putting into a general fund where the legislator spends it on whatever they want. If we take school money in, it should go to schools. If we take highway money in, it should go to highways. If we take money in for small businesses, it should go to small business. We don't do that. They put it in the general fund and then they spend it as they like. We're required to do a budget at the beginning of every year. Nothing else is supposed to happen until that budget gets approved. That's supposed to be the money we spend. But the legislator turns around after the budget and they pass spending bills instead of laws. They shouldn't be doing that. They should be living with the budget that got passed. So I plan on introducing a 5% income tax for the state of Maryland with no deductions. And I'm also planning on going to all these federal departments that regulate many, many taxes we pay and reduce or eliminate those taxes. Thank you.
Thank you. This question will be for everyone also, and since we started with you, Ms. Krish, we'll start with you, Mr. Shea. And so, like I said, for everybody, what is your top 3 priorities if elected?
I'm still Jim Shea. My top 3 priorities start with education. I mentioned that in the last answer. Public education is the key to so much. If you have a great public education system, your economy grows. Income inequality goes down. Everybody has an opportunity. And maybe most important of all, the middle class and social and economic mobility will return to Maryland. That's what education can do for you. We were thought to be one of the top education systems here in Maryland. It's not so. The Kirwan Commission is finding that we are, in fact, the 2nd and 3rd quartile. It's not good enough to be in the middle of the pack of the United States. The United States itself lags behind the rest of the world in education, particularly in the STEM subjects. So our children and our grandchildren are not going to be able to compete on the global level that we need. Education needs to be reformed, and I have a full and complete reformation package. It's online, and it needs to be funded properly if we reform at the same time, with accountability and enhanced career tracks for teachers, assistance for poor communities. It's all in the plan. Second priority, this is tough to do in 2 minutes. Second priority is transportation. As I mentioned earlier, we need better mass transit. We need to connect the entire state, and we need to protect the economy. I have a full state transportation plan that links all corners of the state with each other and moves people to jobs. Third, in order to do these things, as I mentioned a minute ago, we need a robust economy. We need to grow the economy. If you grow the economy and we're producing more and making more as a state, our tax base will rise. It will enable us to do these investments that I'm talking about, and we absolutely have to invest in Maryland to grow the economy. Not worry so much about luring big companies from out of state. Invest in our own small businesses.
Hi. Ben Chillis and I have been endorsed by MSEA, which is the Maryland State Educators Association, 73,000 teachers strong. And what we heard across the state from those teachers was that they are worried about our kids, and we're worried too. They're worried about teachers having the ability to have supplies in their classrooms and to have heat in their classrooms and have the ability to give kids opportunity. That's our number one issue. Another issue that we're running on very strongly is the notion of having Medicare for all. Because bankruptcy caused by healthcare is one of the number one issues in our state and across this country. We are the only campaign who has a full-fledged single-payer program. It is online, and it would be the most affordable program and the best to do. That's why the National Nurses Association and SEIU, which is our healthcare workers, trust us and have endorsed us. The third issue is complicated because it's really keeping all of this in together. I mentioned mass incarceration a little while ago. Our country and our state are falling behind. We're falling behind not being able to afford other things because of mass incarceration. Think about the opioid crisis and what's going on in our state, and recognizing that we have people who are incarcerated now who are addicts, not criminals. What we want to do is change that, because it costs more to incarcerate than to educate. And everyone knows, you ask about how much is it going to cost to educate, but you don't ask what it's going to cost to ruin lives and incarcerate.
Education is very important. Right now, our children are going to school, they're going to school in fear, not knowing what's going to happen next. We have teachers that are leaving Maryland because they're not paid well. We have classroom sizes that are too large and you only have one teacher. I think we've spent a lot of money on things that don't apply to our kids and our future. The money coming from the casino, I don't know where it went. It didn't go where it was supposed to have gone. Money is being, they're misappropriating money. It's being spent on things that don't affect our children. So schools, school safety, that's number one for me. The second thing is crime, the reduction of crime. I say that because in Maryland, I don't know, there's not a whole lot that you can do in transportation or anything else if people are afraid to come out of their homes. So I want to change that. I do believe that getting felons off of the street and into job training is going to reduce the crime in Maryland, period. And that's across the board. Because then talking to a lot of the young guys on the street, that seems to be the census with them. They can't get jobs because they have felons and they're not going to apply for jobs. So I think that's a good idea. Last but not least, healthcare, once again, one of the biggest things for me, another thing for me, because I think that we pay too much for healthcare. And everybody wants to say they want to make it affordable, but children and seniors, I believe that it should be free. Because I think, everybody else is working, but I feel that way because, seniors have really paved the way for a lot of us. And I think that we need to give them something back. So that's where I am. Thank you.
Maryland should be #1 in education, and we were. 4 years ago. Now we're number 6. I think every candidate in this race will say education is their top priority, and that's true. But what education being a top priority means to me and to Rashern Baker means not just full funding pursuant to the Kerwin Commission, but it also means accountability and partnership. It means not just showing up to make political statements, but showing up day in and day out and having an administration that is working with every local jurisdiction to support their education efforts, to provide resources for best practices, community schools, arts integration, STEM learning, and also to tie our community college and four-year college system into the high schools, so that we are actually showing students a route to a job that does not necessarily require a four-year education, post-secondary education if they do not want it. We need to have an effective pipeline of students to careers that they can see and feel, and that we're measuring and tracking and making sure we're actually spending our dollars wisely. I'm a very proud graduate of the Baltimore City Public School System, and I have seen all of the problems and challenges that school system has faced, including increasingly declining enrollment and a lack of trust by many parents. And I've also seen a lack of a partner in Governor Hogan. We need a governor who's a partner to every jurisdiction around education. The other thing is health insurance. Part of that is reacting and saving our health insurance markets from the federal government. And surprisingly, or not surprisingly, the Affordable Care Act, which has been so maligned, has proved remarkably resilient. But that doesn't mean there aren't things we need to do, including a down payment to make sure that we have something to replace the mandate that has been removed. But it also means expanding the use of the Medicaid cost waiver beyond just the hospitals. Maryland has been a leader in identifying cost savings by having a statewide hospital program use of the Medicaid waiver to shift from fee-for-service to actual reductions based on making people healthier. And the final thing is economic growth that serves all communities across the state. Thank you.
Well, I think we know there's many more than 3 issues in Maryland. My top 3, starting with the top one, is going to be education. The second one is going to be the safety department reform, and then the environment. And the reason we picked these first 3 is I've been running for office since 2010. I can't tell you how many times I've heard politicians tell me, we're going to fix these problems, we're going to fix these problems. And they don't get fixed. A Band-Aid gets thrown here, a Band-Aid goes there, they throw money at it. Nobody ever looks at the issues. And now we're to the point where we're having violence in schools. People are actually bringing guns and killing our children. And nobody's talking to these children, nobody's talking to schools to try to fix the problem. You have some people saying, put guns in schools so they can shoot these people when they come in. Is that ridiculous or what? We're going to go straight to a gun to fix a problem? We need to do comprehensive analysis of what's going on in these schools. We need to find out where the funding is going. We need to take the funding away from the state and the federal government and put it in the parents' hands, because we're never going to fix anything if everybody's always chasing the dollars. We just had this in PG County. Didn't we just have them change grades so that the kids could graduate? We're not teaching them, we're changing their grades because PG County needs that federal funding. So they changed the grades so the kids graduated and they didn't learn a thing. This is not good. This is not how you educate children. You don't just take money and then just kick them on the curb. They can't even sign their names on a check anymore. This is ridiculous. My second one is the safety department reform. And this comes with everything from prison reform to law enforcement reform. And I have a comprehensive program on how we're going to do this. Me and my running mate have already been working with some of the old gang members in Baltimore and Hayes County. Just last Friday, we were with 300 gangsters where Freddie Gray was killed, trying to get to the community, get them to start voting for better people. And the last thing is going to be the environment, because we still have a problem with the Congo-Wingo Dam that nobody wants to face. But when the stuff comes through the dam, the whole bay dies. And if the bay dies, Maryland dies. Thank you.
Definitely one of those questions where you do hear violent agreement amongst this panel. For me, education is far and away the top issue. It is truly the story of my life. I would not be standing before you running for governor but for the public school systems. I'm the only candidate running for governor who is the product of Maryland public schools from kindergarten to 12th grade. I'm the only candidate in the field who is running as a daughter of 2 public school teachers. I'm the only candidate who is running with a lifelong teacher and president of the Baltimore Teachers Union. And so for me, it's about setting forth a set of policies from cradle to career. Investing in universal pre-K for 3- and 4-year-olds, fixing the funding inequities, rebuilding our crumbling schools, investing in science, technology, engineering, arts, math, even civics education, because we know November 8th wouldn't have happened, except for the fact that we were teaching for the test instead of raising our children to actually be adults, to be productive citizens. But also making sure that when our kids come out of school, they should either be career ready or college ready. Some number of our kids are going to go into the trades, and those are well-paying jobs. We've got to stop stigmatizing those. We've got to provide our kids with the vocational and technical training to succeed. But if a child wants to go to college, they shouldn't not go because of funding, which is why I want to provide free community college, but also 1% student loans, because on average, a Maryland student graduates with $30,000 in student loans. Second, it's about supporting working families because they are the backbone of our family, of our society. And for me, this is about addressing healthcare, but it's also about making sure we address some basic principles, like the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. And that means guaranteeing paid family leave. I want Maryland to be the first state in the nation that guarantees 3 months of paid family leave. But I also want us to make sure we do address gun violence issues, because there should not be weapons of war on our streets. We shouldn't have mass shootings literally happening every month in Baltimore. And then the final issue for me is job creation, because too many of our children are leaving our communities because we don't have jobs to hire them.
Since we're down to only 6 candidates, this question will be for everybody as well, and it deals with health care, which is also a top issue. Medicaid accounts for about 1/4 of the Maryland budget. Nursing home costs account for a major segment of Medicaid expenditures. Obviously, extending the period of time before someone enters into a nursing home will serve to lessen the nursing home drain on Medicaid. But how to do it? The question is, would you be in favor of a tax incentive to encourage the purchase and retention of long-term care insurance as a means of extending home care and thereby mitigating the nursing home drain on Medicaid? And I will mention that bills before the state legislature the last several years did just that, but never made it out of committee.
I think it's
Yes,
that's me.
Ms. Turnbull.
Hi. Actually, I have a lot of experience in this area. My parents got ill early in their lifetimes. My mom lived in a nursing home for 7 years. And my father was not eligible to be in a nursing home. And what we dealt with on a regular basis was he had congestive heart failure, and he would go into the hospital so that when he would come out, he could be able to be eligible for home health care. Because of that, because it's really something that I had to live with, and I have a long story about how nursing homes did not do preventive health care. My mom lived in a nursing home for 7 years and was never screened for breast cancer. I worked with the governor of Maryland, Donald Schaefer, to change those rules. So I can tell you, yes, we would be 100% in support of that. I would also tell you that one of the things that we would do and have done is created an entire program just for seniors. As a retired federal employee myself, having worked for Congress for over 15 years, I can tell you that what I know is this. We can do things in Maryland regardless of what happens in Washington. And the only way that's going to get done is if you have people who can pull things together, who can build the coalitions to get them done. Because there's no shortage of solutions. But there's a shortage of courage and a will to do it. And that's why we're doing this. My mom's story was a simple one. She was in a nursing home and nobody paid attention to the fact that her family had a history of breast cancer. So 7 years later, when they found that lump, she went in for surgery and died after surgery. And I can tell you this, when I went to see Governor William Donald Schaefer, he said, I don't need legislation to fix this. We're going to work on this issue. And a year later, on Mother's Day, we did, announcing that women in nursing homes and men in nursing homes would be screened for breast cancer and prostate cancer. Thank you.
I'm gonna tell you the truth, I really don't like nursing homes. I really don't. You know, I had to send my mother to a nursing home, and I didn't let her stay there long. But of course, at her age, everybody's saying, well, she's lived long enough, and, I really, we did have a situation with her health care. I think, we had to go back and redo the application, but for me, I think that, as governor, I think that we should pick up part of the cost. Nursing homes are the worst. They're the worst. They really are. And I don't think that people get the proper care in nursing homes. So, but I do believe that we should pick up the cost so that people will get the care that they need while there. I think that we should have nursing homes where we can pay better attention to what's going on with people and not just leave them laying there. So for me, once again, I don't like nursing homes, but I do believe that the government should pick up part of the cost. Whatever is not paid, I think we should pick up that tab, instead of having people move to different places. So that's my take on it.
Thank you. So Rashern Baker, this is a very personal question for him. He cares for his wife at home, who has advanced early onset dementia, Alzheimer's specifically. And so he, one of the stories he'll talk about is she has been hospitalized multiple times. She's had many issues that have required hospitalization. She's always done better when she's come home. Always done better, mentally, physically, in every way. And anyone who's read Being Human or any of the hosts of books and articles looking at some of the misguided policies in nursing homes and the way that we've approached elder care generally in this country should feel extremely passionate about doing better. And that should involve any solution that incentivizes quality care in an environment that is best for people and that reduces unnecessary costs. The other thing I want to say, my personal perspective is a bit, is formed in part having run the criminal division at the state level, and that included the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, and seeing many of the profit-driven, and nothing wrong with profit and being driven by it, but profit-driven choices in nursing homes that ended up in really dramatically impacting negatively the quality of care. And in fact, Maryland was the first, one of the first states to bring quality of care lawsuits against nursing homes and also assisted living facilities. I think we were the first on assisted living. And the theory is that if you cut costs so low, if you cut staffing so low, you are essentially committing fraud on the Medicaid system or the Medicare system. It's equally applicable there because you are not providing the care that you are representing that you are providing. So I am acutely aware of the problems we have in our reimbursement system and how we can better improve the quality of care, strategies of care, and also incentives that really will serve the citizens of Maryland. Thank you.
I can tell you that this issue hits really close to home to me. My wife is a CNA. She works at a nursing home. And they take care of people at their worst. There's a lot of people that can't take care of their family when they get older and they can't take care of themselves. They just don't have the means. And it's great if you do have the means to bring your family member home and take care of them. But there's a lot of people that can't do that. So they go to these nursing homes. We pay these CNAs almost minimum wage. They get paid dirt cheap and they're there to take care of your family. Nursing home can't keep quality people because you're not paying them to stay there and you're overworking them. So of course, I think if we can send some more money towards nursing homes, care will improve. But we can't sit there and strip the cash out of there, pay people no money and then say, oh, how come care is not good? We're kind of kicking ourselves in the butt and not fixing the real issue, which is they don't have the money, they don't have the staff, so they do what they can, the best they can. Nursing homes are very overregulated. And it's very hard to even get through the day getting everything done that you're required to do. There's just not enough people. So.
Yeah, but keep in mind the question dealt with the incentive to keep people out of nursing homes.
I'm getting to that right now. So if you can afford to keep your family member home and you could take care of them, then of course you should have an incentive to do that. Why not? Governor Hogan just gave $5 million of tax incentives to Amazon. Why can't we give $5 million to people to keep their family members home if they can afford to do that and can take care of them? I have no problem with that whatsoever. I think once we go to a flat 5% with no deductions, we'll have plenty of money to take care of all the things Maryland needs to take care of. But as long as we keep letting people not pay taxes and only the working poor pay taxes, we're not going to fix our problems.
This is a very personal issue to me today because my father actually attended the funeral of a family friend who had a number of complications over 2 years. And the family nearly went bankrupt, having to try to treat their father at home and realizing that they were ill-equipped to be able to do that. And this is where government has to play a part. Because no one should be asked this question of, can I afford to take care of my parents at home? But it's also a situation where you know that it is a win-win in the sense that we can preserve the dignity and choice and comfort as our family members age, but also allow for us to maintain lower costs because we've seen in study after study, data point after data point, that aging at home, aging in place is actually a less expensive option. So for me, I want to just make 4 points. First, I absolutely support a tax incentive to invest in long-term care because this is the social safety net that I do think it's incredibly important for us to incentivize individuals to invest in. Second, I want to make sure that we are investing in community-based and home-based care because this is where time and time again you see that we are driving costs towards hospitals where we know that a fee-for-service model ends up racking up the costs and not actually bringing better treatment to our family members. And then, okay, I'm gonna reduce it to 3 points. And then the final point I want to say is we need to incentivize home safety measures because this is critically important. If we don't institute home safety measures, oftentimes when a family member gets injured, they end up going into the ER, and again, those expenses are incredibly high. And then, since I do have a few seconds, the final point I will make is that we also do need to address the nursing home situation in Maryland because we have regulations on the books, but in terms of enforcement, under Governor Hogan, we have seen a number of nursing home violations that have not gone police, and as governor, I will address this fact as well.
I haven't changed my name. I'm still Jim Shea. On March 22nd, my mother passed away after a long illness decline. She was 92 years old. There were 2 things that made the end of her life not just bearable, but okay. One was that she was a Baltimore County public school guidance counselor. She had a good pension, and that took some of the pressure off of the finances. The second was she was able to stay in her home. Now, in fact, she had moved to an apartment, but her furniture was there, her paintings of her father were there, her china was there. She was, in effect, in her home. And it made such a difference. And it was a lot less expensive for society. She went to the hospital a few times as this decline began, and the doctor said, don't come back to the hospital, it's real expensive. Stay at home and we'll care for you at home. And we all did that. And the government should make that easy to do. The accommodations that you need at your house so that you can stay there, whether it's stairs or other, she had an electrical chair that would get her up and down the stairs that she had. The government should provide financial incentives and subsidies to take care of that, and should also make sure that the insurance companies are properly covering these kinds of assistance that you really need to have a livable life. So I absolutely, addressing the question directly, is I would work very hard to keep people in their home setting and care for them that is covered by insurance with accommodations that makes their life bearable. And, you know, indeed, she had her family with her. It was okay.
Thank you. Well, this is a show and tell. I've been carrying a red purse for 30 years. Why do you ask, do you carry a red purse, Diane? Thank you for asking. It is because I want to talk to you about pay equity. So my question for all of you is, what can you do or will you do to advance pay equity for women? Start with Mr. Jones.
Okay. That's a good question. I'm not really, I don't think I could answer that one right. So I'm going to pass on that one. Is that okay?
I definitely don't want to pass. So one of the first, if not the first policy positions papers we put out was on women's equity. And the first issue there was addressing the wage gap. Something that is personal to me, and I'm sure many people in this room. When you go in and you're asked what your salary was before, and then you're offered a salary that's just $1 above it. That is a real problem for women, especially if they've been maybe out of the, raising children or out of the workplace for a period of time and have a lower salary. It just perpetuates the wage gap. And as we know, Maryland has, really significant wage gap. I think even in Frederick County, it's almost $18,000 difference in average salary between men and women. So that was, again, one of the first issues. Also in the Women's Equity Initiative, I included paid family leave, advancing affordable child care, making sure that we're doing everything possible around domestic violence and sexual abuse and a number of other things. But we started with wage equity because it's so critical. And we think one of the other things we need to do is do an audit of state government, because that's something the governor has control of, and make sure that we have equity across salaries in state government. So thank you. It's an excellent question.
Well, I think this issue is a lot more complicated than just men and women pay. I mean, first off, people go to school. People learn a job, they have job experience. All these things get taken into account when you're getting paid. Now, if two people have the same experience, the same college, and they're getting paid different at a place, then of course the state should step in and say, why? And fix that. But we can't just automatically say that everybody that's working should get the same amount of pay. That's not why people spend money to go to college. That's not why you get a job and you learn to do your job well. You have time in service. This all has to come into the factor how your pay goes up so that you get ahead in America. So I think if we find that two people doing the same job with the same experience and the same education are getting different pay, we need to step in. If not, we need to let businesses do what they need to do so that people can grow and get ahead in life.
As the only woman running for governor, I will tell you that this is a core part of why I am running. Because you realize in this state, the fact that we are 84 cents to the dollar is what women get paid in a progressive bastion like Maryland reflects how far behind we are. The fact that it is going to take us until 2043 until we finally get to pay equity. My daughter, who is 10 months now, is going to be late into her, it's absurd. We should not be this far behind. And this is where I feel strongly that within my first year as governor, I will guarantee that all public employees will not have this pay equity gap, because this is where government needs to be leading the charge. But of course, we need to make sure that this applies across the board, and the private sector needs to realize that while we are going to incentivize them to do the right thing, if they don't, we're going to step in. So part of that is transparency. It means making sure that we have independent audits of private companies, because this is an issue that no one can hide behind closed doors. But third, we're going to make sure, and this is where the lawyer and me will come out, Jim may weigh in here as well, but this is where we have to make sure that we not just allow for provisions that are on the books, but that we're actually enforcing them. That people are understanding what their rights are, because time and time again, we empower women with the law, but we don't actually allow them to exercise this. And then the final point is making sure that we are empowering women through negotiations. Because we realize that time and time again, and I hate it, because I sometimes do this when I'm having that bane of my existence, dialing for dollars. I hate asking for money. But oftentimes you realize that men are sometimes better at asking for exactly what they need. And this is where we need to own the fact that we can't be sheepish about this. And that is where providing the training and the counseling, providing the information to know when you go into this bargaining, this is what you should ask for, because this is what you deserve. As governor, I will make this a top issue.
I told you I ran a law firm that grew to be over 700 lawyers. And
who are you again?
I can't remember. I've lost track of who I am. It's Shay, Jim. 700 lawyers, and a high percentage of them are women. And I'm proud to say many of them are as effective as Krish in speaking and making arguments and driving their point. So we worked very hard at making a fair environment for the women to flourish, and many did. There are two problems that are knitted into this. 84 cents on the dollar, and Chris is right, it's 2043 at the rate we're going before we actually make it $1 on the dollar. But there are two problems involved. One is equal pay for equal work. That seems pretty simple. I'll come back to it. We need to do a lot there that we're not doing. But the second is, all too often women get shunted into lower paying positions. And that's much more insidious, much more deflating and discouraging, and I would suggest even more dangerous. Both need to be addressed, and addressed aggressively. As to the equal pay for equal work, you need to make sure that what the employees, what your people are being paid, is known to each other. It should be transparent. I always did that. It makes for sometimes uncomfortable situations, but it's the right thing to do, because people then can see what they're making and what others are making, and you can explain to them if it's appropriate and change it if it's not. You should not ask for the salary history ahead of time. You should pay people what they're worth to your organization. And you should never punish anybody for comparing wages or discussing it in their offices. These are important issues that need to be discussed. So there are specific things that you can do. As to this other, more insidious type of discrimination, we need to do a lot. Education, there are a lot of root causes, but let me just finish by saying, we will do, as a state government, a thorough assessment, an equity assessment of state government to see whether that's happening there. And where it is, we'll address it and be an example to the private sector.
And I agree with everything that has been said. Everything that has been said, and I have a few more things. Number one, we need STEM in our schools. We need kids we need young women to have the opportunity to have the ability to succeed in every field. That's number one. Number two, Maryland legislature actually considered legislation this year to deal with the salary history issue. But once again, things just don't happen and things don't get done, and you're gonna still be winding up carrying that purse. That happens because people don't focus and they don't do things with intention. Ben Jealous is a tech investor. He is the partner of a man named Mitch Kapoor, who founded Lotus. We all remember Lotus, and that's why many of us got computers in the first place, was to have Lotus in our offices. And Mitch sent Ben back. Ben was in Baltimore, and Ben runs the tech investments. 60% of his investments are with women. Women-owned businesses, women who can't typically get capital, who can't have the opportunity to have those businesses of their own otherwise, and he's done that. Most of his businesses are either women-owned or minority-owned, and many are both. And that's why I'm very proud to be running with him, because this is something he has taken the action right off. One of the things that's also really amazing is that in our state of Maryland, our health care has been regulated, women's health care has been regulated in the state government, where women are not able to buy reproductive health products in anything shorter than 6 months at a time. Or they can't buy them 6 months at a time. That is wrong, and that's something else that can be changed when we're dealing with the equity issues.
Now, I don't want you to think I have a one-track mind, but I represent NARFE, and NARFE represents retirees.